that often flies under the radar, like in a big way. It's so important. And that's negotiating power um, for women. And in the patriarchy that we live in, we have no negotiating power at all at this point. Because look what happened to me, right? We're killed if we dare to try to negotiate secretly. But let's back it up and just I'm going to tell you a little story, sort of to emphasize to talk about this. So my dad was a doctor; he was an orthopedic surgeon, and as far as I could tell, his patients loved him. Especially there was this one family that kind of adopted my dad, and my dad sort of adopted them, and so different from our family. They were from like the heartland of Kentucky, Bible Belt. They would show up en masse, like 20, 25 of them on motorcycles, out of the blue with no warning at our house on weekends sometimes, which I think this was like part of what their family liked to do, was ride around on their motorcycles. And they would just kind of show up every once in a while, and my parents would be like, okay, they're here, and, break out some breakfast or lunch or something. This is something our family would never do. Like, my dad hated motorcycles. He scared us off of motorcycles young by telling us about all the emergency room motorcycle accidents in gory detail at the dinner table. And I've only ridden a motorcycle once because he really scared us off. But anyway, so this family was lovely. They're warm and they were kind and lovely, lovely people. And we were invited to one of their daughters' weddings. So we went. It was this small, very Baptist church in the heartland of Kentucky. So I went with my mom, and I can't remember if my brother and sister were there, and of course my dad must have been there. And this is the first real Christian wedding that I think that I'd ever been to. I was a young woman at the time. I think I was like 20, maybe I was younger, maybe I was still at home, so like 17 or something. And in this Christian wedding, like the pastor spent a lot of the wedding talking about how the wife should obey her husband in every way, and that was her job as his wife. And I'm feeling more and more horrified by what I'm hearing, because she's not a slave. No one should be a slave in America. No one should be a slave ever, especially not a woman, to a man. And I'm looking at my mom, and she's like, yes, this is all right. Well, we'll just, we weren't talking, but just sort of, telepathically communicating with our facial expressions of horror. And then it came time to, the pastor said, if you have any, actually said this to the church, if there was any reason for this marriage not to go forward, stand up now. And I was 17, and I am who I am, right? So I was getting ready to stand up and say, don't do this. Don't do this. Don't sacrifice your life to be a slave for any reason. Don't do this. And I was like getting ready to stand up, and my mom has her right hand on my shoulder, and she's like literally holding me down. And I'm like, Mom. And she's like, shh. I'm like, Mom. She's got her hand on my shoulder so I can't stand up. And, it's not my family, right? It's not my family. It's not my religion. It's not my business. And that is wrong. I should have stood up, right? This is our business. This is all of our business. The enslavement of women is all of our business. So, but another point about this is that, as horrific as this sounded to me and my mother, and my parents had a great marriage. I mean, I had a lot of issues with them as parents, but their marriage was strong. And I think for several reasons. One is my mother valued herself. She had a great mom who loved her and her sister, and both of them valued themselves, and I think they got that from their mother. And valued their minds. My mom got a full ride to the University of Toronto at 16. She was the first person in her family to go to college. And on my dad's side, my Bobby Schiller was an entrepreneur. She she founded the first baby goods store in Toronto and ran it for many years. So entrepreneurship runs strong in my family. I think it was hard going, and I'll talk about that later. But eventually, they bought the land that the store was in, and it ended up being kind of one of the fanciest places in Toronto as the years went by. And so they sold that land, and basically that was their retirement money. Thankfully, whew. But my mom, at some point, wanted to go back to school and get her master's. And I think my dad was like, why should you get your master's? I make enough money. And of course she wanted to do stuff for herself. She wanted to think. She wanted to create. She wanted to be in the world. And so interestingly, my bedroom was over my parents' bedroom. I used to hear them argue all the time. And mostly it was my mom fighting for herself, right? Fighting for her rights, fighting for her life. Although I don't know if she would have put it that way. They fought a lot. But outside their bedroom, they didn't fight at all. And so I heard their fights because my bedroom was over their bedroom. And my sister has complained through the years that she didn't really get an idea about what marriage was like because she never heard my parents fight. Which is just kind of interesting, like where kind of our position, literally our position in the world, our physical position, what we hear, what we see is going to shape our perceptions. And because my bedroom happened to be over my parents' bedroom, I heard them fight. They fought a lot, but they still loved each other. But my mother didn't have much negotiating power because we live in a patriarchy. So, for example, after she got her master's, and she came up with a really creative way to sort of pursue her career and also have, the bandwidth she needed to run the family. She didn't do a great job of that, but that's okay. Run our household while my dad was, quote unquote, doing the big work, right? So she set up a job share with another woman, and for 20 years they worked the same job, but the two of them worked together, and it worked out really well. They adore each. She's a great lady. They adore each other, and it helped her have flexibility with her job, and this other mother have flexibility with her job. But my mom, didn't have much negotiating power, and how that showed up in retrospect is that we had really subpar babysitting, like really subpar babysitting. Like for a long time, we had this very, very elderly lady who didn't get out of the couch, and she was our babysitter. And we were incredibly bright, rambunctious, out of control, really unparented children, especially my brother and sister, and they were constantly, like, literally climbing our walls. And at one point, my sister almost died because out in the swing set, my brother had tangled her neck with the swing set and she was strangling. Stuff like that. And then later on, we had a teenage, after they got rid of her, after my brother almost killed my sister, and then they got a teenage babysitter who was bringing in her boyfriend and fucking him in our living room. I loved her because I was, she was a teenage woman and I was like, a tween. But she was bringing in her boyfriend and fucking him in the living room. And other really terrible stuff. And in retrospect, I think it's because she didn't have enough negotiating power to get a really good babysitter. Get a really good, solid babysitter. She was sort of on the edges, fulfilling her ambitions. Because the patriarchy did not say, you have a right to the dignified work. And you have a right to get good quality childcare for your kids so you can do this. And this is just small peanuts, right? Every possible way, women do not have negotiating power. And in fact, I think it seems pretty clear at this point, men intentionally strip our negotiating power. Look what's happening to me.